Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Industry Perspectives. I'm your host, Ainsley Bowden, and today I have the pleasure of sitting down with Luis Antonio, who is the lead designer, director, developer of 12 Minutes, the game that just released a few days ago. Now, I talked to Luis about his history in the industry, including working at Ubisoft and Rockstar, what led him to the idea of the time loop and the ideas behind 12 Minutes, the challenges he faced along the way, his partnering with ID at Xbox, Annapurna Interactive, and also how the reception has been with Game Pass. Let's go ahead and get into it. Luis, good to have you on. I know we've been talking for a long time about this, but it's great to finally get to sit down with you. How you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me over. Can't wait now that the game is out, to talk about it without as many restrictions as I had before.
Sure. I know we were just joking prior to us going live here about I'm sure it's being a whirlwind for you right now with release and as you said, bug fixing and reviews and critics and everything else going on. So we'll talk about all that, of course. But what I like to do, especially for someone like yourself with such kind of a rich history in the video game industry, is let's go all the way back to the beginning. So born in Portugal, right?
Yeah, in Lisbon.
Okay, in Lisbon. Perfect. And so at what stage in your life did you start to find a passion for video games themselves?
It started pretty early. My father was a programmer, actually.
Okay.
But I mean, at the time where we were still using DOS and command prompts. And so we had a PC when I was a kid at home, like a 486 or 386. I started playing games there. I didn't have consoles, and I kind of liked, my father was more like a flight simulator guy, but we play like Grand Prix or I don't know, like those old DOS games. And the passion, I kind of started there. Then I do a lot of art. That was kind of my thing. I did illustration, 3D art, and then I think around university. I wanted to do something in that area, but there was nothing at the time in Portugal. So I did a communication design degree, which was like web design and labels and how to do logos for companies, which I didn't like at all. But I needed a degree so that then I could, leave the country and look for stuff abroad. And that's where it started. I finished university. I applied for Rockstar Games in London.
Yes.
They were looking for an art director position, and I applied. I had no experience, but they hired me as a junior, which was great.
Okay.
And that's it. I started there. I worked there for like 3 years. Manhunt 2, Max Payne 3, Midnight Club, LA. Then I wanted to try something else. I moved to Canada, worked at Ubisoft. I was a lead artist, art director there. Then I got a bit fed up with AAA and how they, there's all this. It's a big machine, There's a lot of the shareholders and the way of looking at games. So I kind of wanted to go back to do stuff that's more creative. So I joined Jonathan Blow to work on The Witness with him.
Yes.
Here in California. And that's it. And then I had this idea of 12 minutes kind of in my head for a few years. I wasn't quite sure how I was going to do it. But then working with indies and having other indies going to the studio and hanging out, I started to realize if I wanted to do this, I had to learn how to program.
Yeah.
So I slowly started to learn. And that's it. Once The Witness was done, I started to work full time on 12 minutes.
Wow. Yeah. So, I mean, you talked through quite a lot there, right? So starting at Rockstar, and I was tracing your journey when I was doing the research of, born in Portugal and, went to university there, and then to London, of course, and then to Canada, and now to US. And it's kind of tracing your dream there along the way. So, yeah, we've heard from a lot of developers, anecdotally that when you're at places like Rockstar, Ubisoft, and nothing against them individually, but just AAA game development, what people usually refer to it as, is it feels like a lot of people such as yourself, especially in the creative area, feel kind of, just too restricted, right? You don't really have any creative freedom. Is that kind of what you're alluding to there, that sense in being that type of role?
No, I think there's creative freedom. I think it's more for example, if if you're working at Ubisoft and you like, modeling people in armor and swords, you're gonna have a blast. You're gonna be doing tons of it. But let's say you actually really care about what this person's sword is doing and how that relates to what the game design is and everything. Then it gets muddier because it's a bit like movies. When you have these big productions, you end up having so many moving parts and so many responsibilities, and there's so much money involved that you have this design by committee side of things, and then you have also this aversion to risk taking, which ends up, I guess, the products end up being, less the kind of stuff I like doing. But
sure.
But I know some people love that kind of, like as an artist, that there was a few artists I was working with that they just love to be told, like you're gonna be doing, armor plates for the next year, and they love that. But for me, I wanted to be more involved in. For me, it's very hard personally when the design of, like, the message you're trying to convey in your game does not match all the other things that are being done for it, and then there's dissonance between, I don't like the Tomb Raider. Remember the reboot of Tomb Raider where it's like, here's this journey of this girl, and then you're slashing throats. And you're like, what? Where did we go from this, like, and glorifying it, with those kill cams and everything. So I think trying to marry all these aspects into what you're trying to say is something I wanted to try doing, and it was very hard to do it in this big studio.
Yeah, that makes sense. I see what you mean.
Yeah.
So how did you first come in touch with Jonathan Blow? Was that just an association that was made, within the industry? Because I know, if I'm correct, you did the artwork for The Witness, right? Which was, he kind of got a reputation for Braid, if I recall correctly, and then moved on to do The Witness, which was his game. So how did that come about?
So the way that went was, so at Ubisoft we had finished the game, and so at this point I was art director, and as art director you have access to. You kind of see more how the things, like how the decisions are taken at a higher level.
Sure.
And I was like, this is definitely not the kind of design process I want to be in. So I slowly started to, I don't know if you know about Spy Party from Chris Hacker. It's another indie game about, you're in a party and one person is a spy, the other person is the sniper, and you're in a party and you have to do some James Bond stuff.
Okay.
There's another person who's a sniper. It's like an asynchronous multiplayer game that I really liked at the time. But the art looked horrible. So I started doing models for him, and just sending them over. Like, look, your game looks, your design looks great, but if your characters look like this, would be awesome. So I just started to throw suggestions at him, because I really wanted to do more creative stuff towards game designs that I really appreciate. So we started this dialogue where he would give me some feedback. I would do some other designs, and then it got to a point that I said, "Look, I want to leave Ubisoft, and I'm going to look for another place to work in. So if you want to collaborate, now's the time." And Chris Hacker said, "Yeah, let's do that, but I'm not ready yet to work with you because I need to finish some stuff. But my friend Jonathan Blow, who's working on The Witness, is about to finish the game, needs some help on the art side. So how about you work with him for a little bit, and once you're done, you join me on Spy Party." So that's what I did. I came to California. I started to help him on The Witness. I don't know if you knew how the game looked before that, but that's it. I kind of started questioning what was he trying to do with his game design and how the art was looking, and we started to kind of to slowly open this box of questions, and what was supposed to be a 6 months to finish the game became 3.5 years to. He also expanded the design and he saw other directions to go, but we redesigned the art direction of the game and tried to solve like this question he had about removing noise out of the visuals so that you look at what's important. So that's how I ended up working on it. So Chris Hacker, then I was deep into The Witness. So by the time he was ready to have some artists on Spy Party, I was not going to leave working on The Witness. So then he hired someone else.
Gotcha. Yeah, Witness I played through as well, and it's really interesting talking to you now, because I think one of probably the most striking thing of that game is the art style. It's been a few years since I've played it now, but it's
how many lasers did you get?
Gosh, I don't remember. I do know I have all but one achievement in the game. So
so you went pretty far.
Yeah, I went through the whole game. Yeah. It took a while. I will admit openly, I did have to look up a few of the puzzle solutions.
Okay, man. That's okay. It's pretty hardcore.
So that's cool. So then, I can only imagine you mentioned it briefly that, you had this idea of what 12 minutes could be in your head, right? And you wanted to do that, but you needed to learn how to program. So we hear often around just, and I have some very, very light many years ago programming experience, but I can't imagine someone like yourself just saying, I need to learn how to program because you want to build your own vision of a game and what that undertaking was like. So how challenging was that?
It was it wasn't like one morning I'm gonna learn to program. I tried.
Sure.
So when I was at Rockstar, actually, so the studio we were in, the London studio, was the first Rockstar studio who's not acquiring. Like usually, Rockstar acquires existing studios and uses whatever they were doing. Like the Midtown Madness guys became the Midnight Club guys.
Sure.
But the London studio was a brand new, fresh. There was nothing before, right? It was a bunch of new people gathered to make this new studio. So when we finished Manhunt 2, the producers were like, "Do you guys have any idea for games? We could make our own game, right?"
No.
And that's when I was like, "What could we do?" And I thought we could do a time loop. We could use the GTA engine. We have this old city thing. Let's simulate everything, but you're stuck in a time loop, And you have this day, and we simulate every single routine. And they're like, "No, that's too ambitious. Let's not do that." But the idea, right? The idea stayed in my head. I always wanted to play with this idea of accumulated knowledge. Then at Ubisoft, there was something similar where they were like, they were open for pitches, but they have, like, once again, it's this dinosaur thing where you propose an idea, you have some designer that is going to evaluate your idea, and if they approve it, it becomes an IP. And I'm like, nah, I don't want any of that. Doesn't make any sense to me. That's not how I want to approach this. So I tried to get some friends to work on this because I didn't want to program. I wanted to focus on the creative design, and I got some programmers. So a couple of evenings when we were in Canada, we would work on this. So they would do the programming, I would do the design. But there's two issues. One is that people that are giving their free time to work on something, right? They're programming all day in a studio, and then they go home to program again for this other dude. And then the things that motivate them are not the things that motivate me. So they would always go on a tangent of, I really like to explore this. I'm like, no, but the game doesn't need that. So it would never go anywhere. And there's also the other issue of, right, game design is, like, if you compare it to art, is like a drawing. Like, let's say I want to draw a character doing something because I have this idea in my head. I need to know how to draw to convey this idea. I mean, I could hire someone to draw it for me, and I could say I'm the artist by constantly giving him orders on what it's in my head for him trying to convey that, but it's very ineffective versus me learning how to draw, and I can just do it and iterate really fast. And big studios have this issue where designers don't know how to program. So you have an idea from a designer that gets implemented by a programmer, and then you have this loop of, that's not quite what I wanted. Oh, I see. So learning to program was literally this aspect of, I could try to do the idea I had in mind, and when it doesn't work, I could just try a little variation on it and work on it. So programming became this. I mean, also with Jonathan Blow, like his studio is a bit different from what people might imagine. It's very open door, so other developers would come in, hang out, work on their games. So there's this, right? Even my idea for 12 minutes, I could talk about it, we would share, I would throw ideas out. So there's this very welcoming, develop yourself creatively in whatever you're doing. So seeing other developers, they came in with their laptops, working on their game ideas. You see what they're doing. They talk about design, they're trying to struggle. It's very enticing, like, because that's what I do with art. And I realized if I want to do game design, I need to go in that direction. So I slowly started to take the plunge, and being surrounded by programmers, right, a lot of tricky challenges, like, I don't know, like how to make a character move, where you have to get a ray that goes from the mouse into the floor, hits a collider, you get a position. I could ask these guys these things every morning, and I go to work, and that made it like a smooth transition.
That's very cool. So you mentioned, you mentioned that you've had this idea in your head for a while, and I kind of saw online, and you briefly touched on it, but the original plan for 12 minutes, I saw something online about it being larger scale. Like you originally planned like either a neighborhood or over a 24-hour time period. Was that true, or was that more related to the Rockstar thing you mentioned? And 12 minutes itself, kind of the apartment and the quicker setting was just kind of how it ended up.
No, I mean it's so what we're talking about is the idea of a drawing versus actually drawing it, and maybe seeing that once it's in the page, things don't make a lot of sense. So once I sat down to build this idea, it became really obvious that if the loop is really long, I mean, actually, if the play space is really big, you cannot see the consequences of your actions, right? In 12 minutes, you're like, I lock the door, I know the guy is going to break in. I tell the wife this, I know, in 30 seconds the outcome of your experimentation. But imagine the loop is 10 hours. And like a puzzle that I was thinking was kind of a similar idea. You're home, you'd go to work, you'd spend your day at work, and then you come back from work. Your family would have been killed or something, something to make you do something.
Sure.
And I was like, okay, now you have to go back to work. You have to make your boss be late to work so you can hack his computer and see something. But then I was like, okay, let's look at this puzzle of making your boss be late to work. Or maybe you can cause an accident. But I mean, the complexity of causing a traffic accident, conveying that to the player so it's very clear, and doing that to access the guy's computer, it's just ridiculous, right? I'm setting myself up for failure. So I was like, let's reduce. And as I reduced it, it also solved the issue of real time. Like if a time loop is a full day, you're not going to be doing puzzles for 11 hours. And then you miss something at hour 11, have to repeat.
Right.
So I shrank the loop. I did like a GTA kind of 30-minute, that is a day. But then it just didn't sound right. Why? How come I'm playing with time and I'm already faking it by making it pass faster than it takes? And stuff like proving you're living the same day. Like one idea I had was that and I programmed all this, there was a piano in the house, kind of Groundhog Day style, and you'd learn to play piano.
Oh, okay.
So there would be books in the apartment that you would pick up, you would read them, then you'd start playing in the piano, then every day you'd pick up a book. But then learning a piano takes like 10 years. So I was faking this knowledge accumulation and then trying to convey to the player that knowledge doesn't quite work like real life. And I was like, let's just make this real. Like what you know is what he knows, and it's literally one-to-one. And it just felt more personal every time I would do this, like real time, real consequences, real knowledge. And that's what led to shrinking more and more the play space.
I gotcha. Okay, that's interesting. So it's pretty widely accepted that you were creating a kind of a psychological thriller here, and you had drew some inspiration from Kubrick. One of the things I really liked when I first turned the game on and you come out of the elevator, is the carpet from The Shining, which is one of my favorite movies. So as soon as I saw that, I had like a smile on my face right at the start. But I knew ahead of time, obviously been paying close attention to the development of this game and the journey. But what about kind of Kubrick's movies or I believe, like Fincher, Hitchcock, those guys kind of associated with psychological thrillers? Is that just something that you've always had a passion for, always an interest in, and you just wanted to build something interactive in that vein?
No. I mean, I love those guys. I love the stuff they do. I devour all those kind of movies, and I love films in general, as a medium. The way. I mean, I wanted to work in film. If I didn't do games, I think I would be working in movies.
Okay.
But for this title, like something I think I've learned through these years in the industry is that like a game is about gameplay, right? It's about the experience. And there was a concept I wanted to explore, which was, right, the accumulation of knowledge and how that can be cool as a game design. I had no idea what that would translate in terms of what the game would be. I didn't know it would end up being a point and click with a couple in an apartment. I didn't know. Like I was just literally, I sat down and I was like, you need, like, there's the knowledge of like, a door that has a key code, you learn the key code, you open the door, and now next loop, that code. But very quickly it became clear that relationships and knowledge you have about people and how you interpret that knowledge is much more interesting than the more mechanical knowledge about things. So slowly, right, it went into the interactive thriller genre. I was like, okay, let's see how movies do this peeling of knowledge, and how can I bring some of that into this, and does that fit with the theme? So that's where I start to look into those films, and also like how they, because like it also goes to learning to program, like because early on I was like, how do you interact with the world? What are the things you can do with the environment? And right, in shooters, you have very clear actions where you just shoot characters. But I want more of that. I want to be able to talk with them, convey emotions, maybe change their mindset. And point and click games were the thing that felt closer to the amount of things you can do. But I want also to solve some of the ambiguity of point and click. So there was this looking how films do things, how other games do things, and just merging them. But in the end, like Kubrick, right, this feeling of being disoriented, or like the Memento example I give, where by changing the order of the scenes, you end up being in the shoes of the main character. Or the same with Rear Window from Hitchcock, where you're in this balcony and you're interpreting what's happening outside. Like, what if we apply some of those principles into the game? Like, the main question was always, when you go into this game, you know nothing. So the character has to be on the same level as you, right? He cannot know more than you know, so that you both can go in this journey of learning what's happening. But if these things are happening, how do you marry the fact that some things that he should know, he doesn't know them? And can I put that into the game itself as part of the experience? So it was mostly answering these questions to make it flow that movies became an inspiration.
Okay. Gosh, yeah, it's interesting. You've that leads to two other questions I have. So I grew up, you mentioned MS-DOS earlier, which is funny because when I started playing this game, it gave me memories of the old Sierra games from the 80s.
For sure.
Yeah, I played King's Quest and Space Quest and all the Quest games, and then, of course, you have some of the Tim Schafer games, the classics
and
as
Ron
well.
Gilbert, Monkey Island,
and Ron Gilbert,
Tentacle, yeah,
exactly right. And so it really gave me those type of vibes, which is a very good thing. It also is a very specific type of game, right? It requires a specific thought process and skill set compared to some other genres. So I found that interesting. But did you find yourself inspired by those as well? I mean, were you someone who looked at those games in the past and really enjoyed them? Did that inspire part of the design?
Oh, hugely. So I didn't play the Sierra games, funny enough. I mean, when you're a kid, you play the games that your friends give you floppy disks.
Sure.
You don't go, there's no Steam store. You go.
Right.
So I grew up like Monkey Island, Day of the Tentacle, like all the LucasArts games, Indiana Jones, Fate of the Atlantis. There was also like Prince of Persia, the original one from Jordan McNamara, and even Another World from Eric Chai, which
Great game. They
had this, right? They had this cinematic approach, this mocap feeling to it. There's a narrative. You don't quite know where it's heading. I mean, you feel in this adventure. So that's the stuff I grew up with. And definitely like 12 minutes at the start, it was literally click on the fridge, open, close, place. But the thing of working in the industry that I realized was that those games have a major flaw where you always get to a point, you have no idea what you're supposed to do, and you end up just guessing, and some of the solutions are pretty ambiguous, like mixing the rubber chicken with whatever, right? You're guessing at that point.
Yeah.
And I wanted to remove some of that. So I tried, right? I tried to remove all the verb concept. I mean, you have verbs, but they're very clear. It's things you pick up are things you can combine. And these things you pick up, I try to make them as unambiguous as possible. Like early on, for example, you have a wallet. There was bread at the table. There was, and I could see people who would play. They would be like the wife, like the dinner. There was early on, she was making a lasagna that was in the oven, and then people were like, "Oven, man, I can warm stuff. I'm gonna warm this. I'm gonna do this." I'm like, "Okay, no oven anymore." I made a soup. Oh, soup. There's a big soup. Maybe I can warm the soup. Throw the soup at the cup. No soup. Let's make a dessert. But there were forks. Oh, forks. I can use the forks. No, let's put spoons. So I had to. There was a lot of this going around this ambiguity. Even the knife, like even now that the game is out, I'm really glad I can talk about all this. But like early on, you could give the knife to the wife so she could equip herself to fight the cop.
Okay.
But then if you give the knife to the wife and she uses it, but you attack the cop with the knife, what the knife does becomes ambiguous, right? The knife has to do the same thing. A knife stabs something, no matter where you use it. Because otherwise you start to question, oh, maybe the knife on the window is going to open the window and I can leave the apartment. And then you're like, then what else am I missing? So it was trying to do this kind of work process of choosing the elements and making sure the interactions were the same all the time, so that you can close the game, you can make a plan, and hopefully the plan goes according to what you have in mind, or if it doesn't, you learn something that you can use later on, and hopefully removing some of this frustration of the old point and click games.
Yeah, I can only imagine. It's one of the questions I was going to ask you. As I played through it and I started, one of the things I really enjoyed about it was exactly what you kind of referenced earlier, which was, I would try something and I would get a different reaction or a different something would occur. And then my first thought is, oh man, well, maybe if I do X, Y, and Z on this next one, and it just kind of keeps you going and experimenting with new things. But as I was playing that from your point of view, I was trying to envision, wow, I wonder how many iterations and how many, kind of if-thens he had to go through to get all of these things to work in unison the way they are in front of me right now. I could only imagine how extensive that was.
Yeah, that was the trickiest part, was because early on I was just programming these things. I would write the code, like literally if else this, yeah. But then it grows, and I could not manage it anymore. I could just not see the whole picture.
Sure.
So it was finding a way to that was the biggest challenge, was to visualize this in a way that I can keep putting more depth to it and not get lost, right? So I started to look at flowcharts and being able to write the whole thing as a flowchart or a mind map kind of, and then separate dialogues from like AI behavior. In a way, those flowcharts would be read directly into the engine. So that way I could, like let's say the wife is sitting down, she's reading a book, she hears the thunder, at the same time you're starting the dessert, maybe the cop rings at the door, like she needs to know all these things that are happening, choose which one she wants to deal with, and then resume what she was doing before. So being able to see all the play space was finding a way to visualize this constantly without getting lost was the trickiest part. But once that was solved, I could just build depth into the permutations or just remove things, right? Removing items would, like early on, you could drag bodies, you could put things on the floor, so people would spend hours. Like if I put the pocket watch in this location on the floor and I kill the wife and I drag her here, or so it was like it became more of an exercise of removing things that would distract you from what the game is, and I realized by doing that, the game becomes actually more richer because you feel more in control and you can memorize what's happening, right? I know a lot of point and click games or a lot of time loop games, they always give you a timeline of what's happened, or at 3 p.m. this guy is going to do this, at 5 p.m. this is going to happen. And I wanted you to have all this in your head, so it goes along with the theme of you interpreting what's happening, and I think it just becomes more personal. So it helped found that balance, like reducing things, making it all easy to digest and interpret.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So looking back at the history of this, I was actually in the crowd at the Xbox conference when this premiered.
Oh, I was there too.
Yeah. So, when this came up, and, Xbox is one of the things I like about the recent E3 conferences is the indie sizzle reel they do, where they show a bunch of the indie games coming up. And this one just stood out immediately to me. But going back, I was fascinated to learn that, this game, which I didn't know at the time, had been shown in 2015 at PAX originally, right? With a planned release of 2016. Which, please correct me if I'm wrong, and you can add some context here, but it sounded like at that point is when you brought on some additional kind of help to further, I guess, flesh out animations and other things. And then at what point over the past few years did you get to where, you brought on kind of the Hollywood stars for the voice acting? Because obviously that got a lot of press, right? And it's gotten a lot of attention to the game, that you've got Willem Dafoe and Daisy Ridley and James McAvoy as kind of your core voice actors.
Yeah, I mean, like looking at it, the way it went was like I was working on The Witness and doing this on my free time every evening, learn to program, work a little bit, and then it got to a point where I would have this prototype. Like you had the skeleton of the experience, you could enjoy it, which is a 2015 prototype, and I was showing it to friends. They're like, "Look, you should do this full time. This is pretty good. Like it's worth exploring this idea." So I decided let's test this in a big crowd. So I was like, let's look at the next game event that's coming out, PAX East.
Yeah.
I'm going to go on the Indie Mega booth. I'm going to put the game there and I'm going to see who plays it, And that was it. That was literally a test to see, is it worth my time to do this game?
Okay.
So like people would come to the booth, they would look at it. They were like, they wouldn't engage because I wasn't even saying it was a time loop. I was like, I'm going to leave the time loop as a twist as they play. So no one would play it. I was like, okay, I have to tell them it's a time loop. So it also helped me understand what it is that makes people enjoy this game. And then I was like, I didn't know anyone like from the PR, the press side of things. So Greg Miller, he went to check the game out. And then he loved it. And then he spoke about it. Like they were doing some panel that day in the evening. Then it spread out. And I got like Giant Bomb, Polygon, Kotaku, all of them came to check it out.
Yeah, Greg Miller's a pretty big industry person. That's a good catch there.
At the time. I don't even remember him coming to the booth. Like, they you know who that guy was? Like, who? And so then I realized that, then the snowball. I got some reporters talking about it. I was like, okay, I think it's worth doing this. So I sent the bill to some press people because then the next step, for people who don't know how these things work, is you need money to make the game. And I'm not going to be like, I don't know. You need the money to live. And I don't want to be doing this with a second job because it's pretty hard. So the process, like there's kind of two ways you can get funding. One way is you write a pitch or a design document, you gather some images, you do a small demo and you try to show it. But I prefer that you just play what I want to do it. So what I did, I sent the build to some reporters. They played it. I got those early Rock, Paper, Shotgun, Polygon. They all review this prototype, which the one I was planning, like I'm going to get funding and I'm done in a year. And that helped me, have more leverage when I was looking for who would like to fund this project. And then Microsoft, they were interested. They were like, it took a while to find publishers, mostly because how long ago? 6 years ago, the publishers and then like I told you, I have this thing from the AAA industry that any publisher that has this, I want to make money out of your game and that's my main goal and I don't really care what you're trying to do, it was like a no. So it took a while to find people who understood what I was trying to do. So Microsoft was in. They were like, look, here's some money, do whatever you want to do, and that was the plan. I'll be done in a year. I have a crew of like, get an artist, get a sound designer, get a musician, and we wrap this up quickly. But then the more I worked on the game, the more potential was there. And the game, I had no plans for voice acting at the time. It was all going to be just subtitle or like dialogue balloons.
Yes.
But then it was like, look, this is revolving around these three characters. It feels like a theater play. There's all this. If we had voices here, this would be amazing. And Annapurna Interactive, they were starting at the time. They were, looking for titles that would fit the things they were trying to do narratively. We started to talk, and we were both, this is, you guys have this access to this talent. You understand what I'm trying to do. So we just started to collaborate. And that's when the game kind of continued expanding from what it was going to be in 2016, 2017 to, the version you saw at E3 where we were like, let's get voice actors. Let's make this feel like a film as much as possible, and invest on expanding all these aspects.
Yeah. Wow, that's impressive. Because one of the kind of clarifications I was going to ask you, and I couldn't remember if you had worked with. Obviously, I knew there was an Xbox partnership there at some point, but I couldn't remember if you worked with the ID at Xbox group.
Yeah, it was ID at Xbox group.
Okay,
it was from ID at Xbox.
And then, but Annapurna kind of came in along the way as well, and that's who the publisher is, of course, right? So
yeah.
Okay. And they helped basically. Annapurna put you over that line to where you were able to kind of invest more into the final product with the voice actors and everything else.
Yeah, and also
awesome.
like it was also like, because there's early on I was so disappointed with the way big studios do things, and also seeing like how Jonathan Blow does his own thing, and other developers like Genova Chan on Journey, like he also tried to be very independent. Like I spoke with them, tried to get their point of view, and everyone was like, "Look, what you want is funding, and you do everything." But I actually don't like doing everything, because you're managing the budget, you're managing all these logistics, the hiring, the contract.
Sure.
And then suddenly you're doing no game design. You're just focused on all this bureaucracy. And partnering with Annapurna, they could take care of a lot of this, So I could, let's say we want to schedule a motion capture session, right? I have to focus on the animations we're going to record, the emotion impact of them, and all the scheduling and the actors. I don't have to focus on flight tickets and booking the place and all the logistics, right? So suddenly it was this really good relationship where each one could play to their strengths to get the product out, and it developing the game became a pleasure. It was my focus was just making the game versus handling all these other things that I didn't want to handle. But the people that were handling it are people whose goal was the same as mine to
that's great. I think
to explore what he's exploring.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just going to say, we Annapurna, especially since apparently when you were first talking to them and they were getting into the game side, I mean, they've really grown as well. And I know a lot of the games they help produce are just fantastic, and it's great to see projects like yourselves and hearing from you directly that, you maintain the level of freedom for your vision while still getting assistance to produce it the way that it needed to be produced. That's excellent.
Oh, it's crazy. I know a lot of publishers and like, right, not only because of where I was in the industry, but it was literally a year of talking with, I think, all of them, and these guys are very unique. It's a very specific genre that fits what I'm trying to do. Like, I don't think they would publish, like a FIFA game or
sure.
Genre, but yeah, they understand. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. So, and I want to ask you, if you don't mind, about Game Pass, because it's a big topic in the industry right now. A lot of the audience, always focus on Game Pass just because it's grown so much over the past 18, 24 months. Obviously, there's details you can't share about the arrangement or everything else, I'm sure. But how was your experience there in kind of agreeing with Microsoft or Xbox to put it on Game Pass? And obviously now that the game's released and been out for 3-4 days on Game Pass, what's that been like for you?
So I have two perspectives, right? As a consumer and as a developer.
Sure. Let's hear it.
As a consumer, it does make sense. Like I use Spotify a lot. I don't buy CDs anymore. Like, it's even hard to remember, you buy a CD, you put it and you hear the same band over and over again. Or you hear radio and you have all these commercials. They cut the song halfway through. You hear only the hits they give you, but suddenly you have this catalog of, right? I make my playlist. I get my friends' playlists. It's crazy. Like, it really expands. But then you hear about the musicians not getting paid very well, right?
Yes.
But I'm just talking from the consumer point of view. Same with Netflix and all these, Amazon Prime. You have all these services that really allow you to dig into these catalogs. But for example, Netflix hasn't stopped me from going to the cinema, because it's a very unique experience that you cannot get out of Netflix. On the other hand, you can now experience, like, TV shows have evolved thanks to that, right? You no longer have like MacGyver or Knight Rider where no one ever dies, resets at the end of the episode. You can have like Game of Thrones. You can have these epic TV shows that are a big story, and you don't have to consume them every Sunday with a million ads in the middle. It's just changing the way stories can be told, I think.
Right.
And even the budgets for these stories, right? You have these movie productions for TV shows, which is great. And I think eventually games will go in that direction. And we've seen this, like, all platforms have their subscription models. And Game Pass, I think it's another one of them. For this title specifically, it makes sense in the way that it helps get a larger audience to look at this.
Yeah.
And I think you'd have people like, and I try to make a game that's extremely accessible. And so, like, I hear a lot of people who don't play games that are playing it, or people whose partner, like, they pick it, what are you playing there? And then they sit down and they're both involved solving this mystery, or they can even take the controller, right? They're not struggling with A to shoot, B to equip,
right?
Moving, looking up, powering up, crafting. There's none of this. Levels. It's just a smooth sailing, and I think Game Pass allows this audience to be exposed to this, which I think is pretty cool. Yeah,
that's awesome. If you don't mind me asking, and I don't know,
no. If I don't want to answer, I'm just going to tell you. It's like...
Okay, fair enough. What I was going to say is, how's the reception been from your point of view, both critically and commercially? Are you seeing the amount of people you were hoping to see play it, more or less, or what have your thoughts been about what the critics have thought about it? Because I know, even for myself, who reviewed it, right, and I told you I really enjoyed it. I gave it a pretty good score, and I wrote some of my thoughts in my review about it. So we'll talk more about my experience in just a moment. But I've seen some other critics go higher than me, absolutely adored it top to bottom, and then I've seen some other critics go lower, as usual, right, where they're like, I don't really get this. And I think, going back to what I said earlier, I think, at least to a degree, of all the people I've spoken to about it, which is quite a few, there's definitely some people who I don't think have the not necessarily the attention span, but they just don't have the for like a point and click adventure game, right? It is a specific genre, and I think that was off-putting to them. But I think for the people like myself and others I've spoken to who either have history in the genre or just really were engaged with the narrative and the idea of what was happening in front of you, really enjoyed it. So, just your perspective on both, like I said, critically, commercially, how are you feeling about it a few days after release?
I'm pretty happy about it. Like, my main goal was, first, I do this because I love developing games. It's super fun, right? And every time you say, oh, you took 7 years, I'm like, yeah, man, I was having a lot of fun for 7 years. It's not like I'm suffering for 7 years. And when I finish this game, I'm gonna make another one. I'm gonna do the same thing. So
sure,
this has to be as pleasurable as possible. So my main goal was that once this game is done, I can do more games.
Yeah.
And in that sense, commercially, I think we're good for that. I can do more games, and I won't be I won't be struggling. I won't need to be bound to people's, like the thing we're talking about, like publishers want to cut my wings in directions I want to take. That I think it's solved, which is great. What I wanted.
That's good to hear.
How the world is reacting to it, it's kind of like that PAX East event was an eye-opener into, like, anyone who wants to make games, I would say, seeing how people react to your thing and understanding how they react, it's huge. For example, like, next to my game at PAX East, we were in an indie mega booth, which is like a indie mini booth, which you have a column of like 5 games, and they have these columns, and so next to you have a puzzler, you have a shooter, you have all these sounds, and I realized, like, this experience you need to want to play this and give your time and attention to it. It requires attention, like you were saying, and after PAX, I would always ask, like, every event, the game has to be in a place that's calm. Or we need really good headphones. It needs to be dark, and it needs to be built in a way that you have to be invested, right? The moment you stop being invested, it just doesn't work. And that's why we have this long opening where we put you into the experience before it starts, so you calm down. This is what you're going for now. And exactly what you said. Like, I think people who are expecting something else, or just they don't click with what this is saying, they're gonna hate it. But the ones that do, they go through it. But something that I like is, first, I like that there's, like, Ubisoft and really had this, let's make everyone like the game, and you end up with this this pasta mushed thing that is not this or it's not that kind of. And I'm glad that we're having these reactions. Like, even some pretty low reviews that I've been seeing, they say, look, I cannot forget this game. It did something to me that I'm feeling, and then, like, I'm like, that's great. That's what I wanted. I mean, you don't like it, that's fair. But the things you're talking about, like, I felt I was stuck in a loop. There was frustration. Yeah, man, you're in a loop. there was also these discovery elements. I mean, it's what I wanted, and I also think there's this game was it was a one-man band kind of thing all the time. But I think once we got the actors, it started to look like Inside, for example. When Kojima compared it,
I was going to ask you about that. I mean, he's one of the most respected game directors in the industry, and he's singing your game's praises. That's got to be kind of surreal.
Oh, it's awesome. I mean, I love it. I because like, no doubt that the animation is janky. Yeah, there was no animators. There was people doing the mocap. There was someone cleaning them up, and I was putting them in the engine. I've never done animation, so that's the best I could do, kind of. Even characters going over each other, like doors. I don't know if you've heard about the issue with doors in games.
No.
Doors are very tricky in games.
Okay.
And this apart, like even when I realized how hard it is to have characters in a very small space, like there's all these technical issues you have to solve. But me, I'm like, I think if the animation is amazing, but the puzzle design is not that interesting, no one's gonna like it. But if I nail the game design, I think it's okay if the other elements are a bit jankier. So yeah, so that was it. That was kind of what I wanted to do. But yeah, I mean, in terms of perception, like going back to your question, yeah, I mean, it's kind of what I expected. I was already seeing that in playtesting and QA and everyone who touches the game, you love it or you hate it. But no matter what, I think it's doing things that most people haven't experienced before. And yeah, I mean, I think it marries, honestly, there's this narrative happening in real time all the time, kind of, that you're building versus cutscene action. There's no cutscenes, right? You are in the cutscene the whole time. And I think that's kind of cool. And it takes a while to see the boundaries of the walls of this space that you're playing in. And I think that's cool. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I did too. I think one of the comments I made in my review was, it's one of the most kind of unique games I've played in years. And I think that's a good thing because, as you were saying, referencing Ubisoft and my podcast and others have had conversations about some of the issues with their games. But you're right. You've created something that's unique. And I think it's listening to you speak is really enjoyable to see someone like yourself be able to create something. And if someone doesn't like it, that's fair. But it's pure to what you were trying to create. And I think that a portion of the gaming community obviously recognizes that and really enjoys it. So I think that's probably one of the most, the best compliments you could get about what you were trying to achieve.
Yeah. I mean, I try not to care much what people will say, but this is something that people will experience, right? A game is for you to play. So there's definitely very important what people think about it and how they interact with it. Yeah. I'm happy with. I mean, it's the best I could do. It's literally the best I could do with what I knew at the time as I was making things. Like if I could go back, I would do other things differently, but I can't.
So sorry, my cat's trying to join the conversation here. No Yeah, so I think, one other question, if you don't mind, is, with Kojima singing your praises and posting about your game multiple times, have you actually talked to him about it directly?
No, I haven't. No. I mean, like you said, the game came out 4 days ago. I'm still, like, I was just looking, a new bug that someone caught. I want to fix that. I'm still in that phase of making sure the game gets smoothed out some edges that we never caught in QA that everyone is catching.
I gotcha.
But yeah, man, I would love to talk with him. I love the stuff he does. He's also very out there and he tries. You see, he has these things he wants to try, and he nails most of them. Where you get this feeling playing his games, you're like, what the hell? What? and I love that. And he has this big movie side influence.
Yes.
And I remember playing Death Stranding as I was wrapping up development, and yeah, there's things there that I really admire. To be great to chat with him. See what.
Very cool. Very cool. So you mentioned hindsight, right? If you could go back now, one thing I will comment on is you mentioned about the animations being janky, but the game design. was where you're focused. I will tell you from my perspective, I didn't think that about the animations at all. I completely agree with you, at least from my perspective, that I was so focused on narrative and what was going on in the scene and where I was driving towards. I didn't think anything about negative about the animations. I think that's
great.
Yeah, it's very minor in the scope of what the game is. But you mentioned hindsight, of course, and we've talked through your path to development and all of these things. And I would ask you, both for if you could go back, do you have any regrets or things you would change? But
no regrets. Yeah.
No regrets. Hey, fantastic. So what would your advice then be? Because the gaming industry is booming, right? I mean, it's growing exponentially, and we're seeing new studios pop up. I'm sure just loads of people coming out of universities across the world, right, who want to get into game development or make their mark like you now have over your career so far. What could you offer? What would you say to that young 19-year-old aspiring, college student, university student who wants to take the journey you've done so far?
I'm trying to think what I would say to myself.
Yeah, and I kind of put you on the spot here. I didn't mean to, but I think it's interesting to hear your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest advice, honestly, is to be sure you enjoy what you're doing. I think that's the most important one by far, because I see a lot of people in the industry who, like, this happens a lot. You join a studio, right, and you start working in this studio, and let's say you want to do characters. Like, this happened with me. I was pretty multidisciplinary in terms of art. I could do characters, environments. I was good at illustration, and I was working in this Midnight Club, LA. We were doing a PlayStation version of the game,
right?
And we had to paint the skyboxes. Like the texture of the sky as you're racing.
Yeah.
And I was the only one who was pretty good at it. So I started to paint all the skyboxes. And suddenly they were like, hey, you're the skybox guy. You're going to be painting all of them. And I was like, look, if you want, I can make them really shitty so you realize that I don't want to be doing this. Right? Because that's not what I want to do. And I think I see a lot of people getting lost in... Suddenly they forget the reason why they joined the industry or why they're doing these things. And then they start... I don't know if you start crunching a lot or if you're working in projects you don't like. So making sure you always evaluate what you want to do and you push towards that, because eventually, even if things don't go the way you want, at least you'll be able to sleep at night and be happy with what you're doing. And that's what I've learned. Like all these studios I've worked in, like whether you have a really good salary, whether you just get praises for working in these big studios, but maybe the projects are not rewarding.
Yeah.
You can look for that reward somewhere else. And it doesn't mean what you're doing is wrong or it's not what you want. It's just keep digging. And especially nowadays we have, like when I started, there was no Steam. If you wanted to do a game, you need to write a full game engine, right? There was no digital distribution. You had to make CD copies, right?
Right.
So forget about being an indie,
Right. Yeah.
And now you have, like, you go online, you have all these people to help you go through all these challenges. So it's really, you have more information that you can ever be able to consume. So following what your gut feeling tells you and kind of what you feel like doing, I think might be easier, because then you'll find like-minded people that want to work with you. You're going to find answers to the questions you have versus being fully open. So yeah, that would be the advice, like follow your dreams. Do it.
That's awesome though. And it is, right? It's such a different, obviously I don't have the same perspective you do, but it feels like such a different industry than it was even 10 years ago, never mind 20 or 30, right? I mean, it's just completely different environment, which is great. And it's probably part of the reason we're seeing such a growth of people and studios and developers and everything else.
And variety. There's this, like 12 minutes. I can do 12 minutes. And even if it's not like, the most successful game in the world, there's enough audience that I can keep doing this.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Awesome. So, I have to ask you, because you alluded to earlier that, this will allow you obviously to continue making games and ideas you have. So is the idea for your next game already there, or are you still kind of thinking about what you want to do, or do you have something planned already?
I have something planned. I think it's a super cool idea. I think it's better than 12 minutes. And it expands on a lot of what I've learned in this project. Like there's something about this. I mean, I don't want to say much actually because it's too early. But yeah, I have something in mind. I need some vacations first.
Sure. Understood.
I'm pretty exhausted from non-stop working.
Sure.
But yeah, I have an idea in mind. I have people to work with in mind. It's just a matter of starting to put those pieces into place.
Sure.
There's some things I want to change that are more industry focused. Like, for example, like most studios, like Ubisoft, it's a good example. You have this team of 50 people, 100 people. When you finish a game, you have to have another idea because you're going to have 100 people who you're paying.
Sure.
So you have this curve of you got to pay these people. You got to have an idea, even though you didn't have time to think about it, because you have. So there were projects that I was literally doing art for. You have no idea what the game is going to be about. It's going to be in space. You're going to have spaceships. So let's do some spaceships. And then, of course, you throw everything away 3 months after because you realize it's not going to be in space because the game design doesn't work in space. So I want to solve that problem. Like I would like to have more people on a more not be so solo like I was this game. Have more people full time, but I don't want to have to carry all this luggage that makes harder. Like maybe next game I do is a 2D game, and if I have built a team that is specialized in 3D, then I'm stuck. Like movies do. You have a script, you build a production team for a movie, and then you disassemble that team and you build it again for whatever you do next. So right. I don't have to do a period piece all the time because I have the set designed for a period piece. Maybe I'm going to do a sci-fi film next. So I want to find a way to solve that problem in development, so I can still have this big production, but not be stuck to whatever team has been built. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's awesome, man. It's awesome. Well, Luis, man, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you today. I think one of the things I try to do with both this series, but also our site in general, is provide more insight into actually how games are made and actually what's going on in the industry rather than just the surface level news. So your insight in both your journey, the game creation, everything we've talked about is just fantastic. So I want to just say thank you very much for agreeing to do this and taking the time. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. It was super fun. I love talking about this stuff, and I'm glad the audience is growing, wanting to hear what's like when you lift the curtain and you see what's behind the scenes.
Yeah, exactly right. And I think it's a good thing, not only for the obvious reasons, right, but it's also good in the effect to the effect of it helps people understand the complexities, right, of game development and the challenges and everything else, and respect the time that people like yourself spend in creating these things that we and enjoy every day. And I think when you have that context and you have that knowledge, it creates an appreciation for it that creates a better conversation, I think, a better dialogue.
I agree. So, you see the humans behind it.
Exactly right. Yeah. And that's 100% necessary. Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you again. Is there anything you'd like to say to anyone listening or watching? Anything you'd like to, just say before we head out?
No, just enjoy the game. I try it out. It's pretty fun. It's a labor of love. I'm really glad it's out. And if you don't like it, that's okay.
All good. So thank you again. This was Industry Perspectives with Luis Antonio, designer, director, writer, everything of 12 Minutes. You can find the review on seasongaming.com. And thank you, as always, for tuning in. We will see you next time.
Thank you.